In the chilly days of February 1258, the most influential clan in the ancient world of faith and empire committed an error that would wipe their legacy clean from the pages of time. Deep within the grand Ashford residence in Baghdad, encircled by walls adorned with shimmering gold patterns, gentle streams drawn from the mighty Tigris River, and vast collections of knowledge that predated entire kingdoms, the sovereign and his kin lingered in uneasy anticipation. Beyond the city's boundaries, the invaders' massive catapults stood ready, the earth shaking from the thunder of countless hooves. Plumes of dark smoke curled upward from hamlets that had been reduced to ashes overnight. For more than 5 centuries, Baghdad had worn many crowns. It was a seat of governance, a hub of learning, the very heart of global wisdom. Its leaders clung to the conviction that such a place was eternal, immune to ruin. But what unfolded wasn't a wild outburst of brutality or random slaughter. It was a calculated, organized, and deeply intentional unraveling of an entire noble heritage. By the time this tale wraps up, you'll grasp 3 truths that history often skirts around with discomfort. First, why the conquerors didn't just swiftly behead King Reginald Ashford, and why the way they ended him carried more weight than a simple killing ever could. Second, why every soul in Baghdad's elite circle was seen as a threat to be neutralized, not as captives deserving pity. Third, how the obliteration of this one household reshaped the course of world events forever, and why no center of faith in that tradition ever truly rose to fill Baghdad's void again. This isn't a story of mere barbarism. It's about dominance, meticulous planning, and the complete erasure of threats. And it all started well before the first barrier crumbled. If you're drawn to tales from the medieval era, go ahead and tap that subscribe button right now, and drop a note in the comments about where you're tuning in from, your era, your corner of the world. It's incredible to think how these ancient echoes can reach across oceans and centuries. King Reginald Ashford was the 37th in the Ashford succession. Through his veins flowed the blood of rulers who had once commanded lands from the vast western seas to the edges of the eastern giants. In truth, though, his grip extended barely beyond Baghdad's walls and the nearby fields. True authority had long drifted to advisors, warlords, and competing houses, yet the emblem of power endured. And that's what Reginald leaned on hardest. When the Mongol messengers rode in, bearing demands for surrender, payments, and recognition of their overlord's might, the king didn't rally his forces. He didn't shore up the fortifications or summon warriors from distant outposts. No, he dispatched missives, parchments laced with pleas to divine will, assertions of his sacred position. Reminders that Baghdad was a hallowed ground not to be trifled with. What he couldn't fathom proved deadly. The Mongols had no regard for holy sites. To them, the world boiled down to yield or vanish. For Hulagu Khan, the grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan and leader of the Western hordes, Reginald's replies weren't negotiations, they were defiance. And defiance activated a strategy that had already dissolved scores of noble lineages throughout the vast steppes and beyond. The Mongols didn't share thrones, they enforced absolute closure. Their creed was straightforward: as long as a noble blood runs free, uprising lurks in the shadows. So, when they overran a realm, it wasn't enough to crush its fighters. They dissected its upper echelons with exacting care. Male nobles vanished. Successors were scrubbed out. Women were reassigned or integrated into new folds. Emblems shattered. Chronicles burned. This wasn't sadism, it was a safeguard against resurgence. Baghdad presented a peculiar challenge. King Reginald wasn't merely a monarch, he was a spiritual beacon whose influence rippled far past his shrunken domain. Letting him breathe meant revolt could spark anywhere, rallying under his banner. Hulagu didn't advance on Baghdad to claim it. He came to extinguish the Ashford essence once and for all. Picture the scene in the months leading up to the clash. Inside the Ashford residence, life carried on with a deceptive calm. Reginald would often wander the echoing halls, his robes whispering against the cool marble floors, pausing to leaf through ancient tomes in the library. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the Tigris, casting golden hues through arched windows, he gathered his closest counselors in a chamber fragrant with incense and blooming jasmine. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of worry, "these barbarians from the east send their threats, but surely they understand the weight of our heritage. Baghdad is not some frontier outpost. It is the soul of our faith, the cradle of enlightenment. What say you to my letters? Shall we add more verses from the sacred texts to sway their hearts?" His chief advisor, a wiry man with a beard streaked in gray, leaned forward, his eyes darting nervously. "Your Majesty, words are powerful, but perhaps we should consider bolstering the walls. The reports from scouts speak of an army like no other, endless riders, machines that hurl boulders like thunderbolts. Faith is our shield, but iron might reinforce it." Reginald waved a hand dismissively, a faint smile playing on his lips. "No, my friend, the divine has protected us for generations. These Mongols are nomads, not conquerors of the eternal. Our replies will remind them of that." The room fell into a murmur of agreement, though doubt lingered in the air like unspoken shadows. Little did they know across the horizon, in the Mongol encampments, such sentiments were met with cold calculation. Hulagu's tent was a stark contrast, canvas walls flapping in the wind, maps sprawled across rough tables, the scent of horse sweat and campfire smoke pervasive. As his scouts delivered the king's letters, Hulagu read them aloud to his generals, his tone mocking. "Listen to this, Baghdad is sacred, protected by the heavens." Sacred. To whom? "Our skies are the same, and they favor the bold, not the idle." One of his lieutenants, a battle-hardened warrior with scars etching his face, chuckled grimly. "They hide behind paper and prayers. Shall we prepare the engines, my lord?" Hulagu nodded, his eyes gleaming with resolve. "Yes, if they won't bend, we'll break them. And remember our way, no loose ends. The bloodline must end here." To understand the Mongols' mindset, think back to their earlier triumphs. Take the fall of the Khwarezmian Empire just decades before. When its Shah defied Genghis, the response wasn't haphazard raids, it was a systematic purge. Cities like Samarkand were encircled, their rulers' families hunted down one by one. Princes were dragged from hiding and dispatched without mercy, their wives and daughters parceled out to prevent any claim to the throne. Records of their lineage were torched in public pyres, ensuring no future bard could sing of revival. This pattern repeated in China, where imperial clans were uprooted like weeds, their palaces stripped bare, their symbols melted down. It was a blueprint for empire building: eliminate the roots, and no weeds grow back. Baghdad was next on that list, but with a twist. Its king held not just temporal power but a spiritual aura that could inspire from afar. The encirclement of Baghdad kicked off in the early weeks of 1258 and wrapped up by mid-February. That swift timeline speaks volumes about the mismatch. Mongol tacticians cleverly diverted the Tigris, turning its waters into weapons that swamped the defenders' trenches. Massive trebuchets pounded the outdated ramparts, stones crashing like avalanches. The Ashford troops, starved of funds and riddled with disarray, buckled under the assault almost from the start. Within the city, fear spread like wildfire through the markets and mosques. Merchants shuttered their stalls, families huddled in basements, whispering prayers for deliverance. One young scholar, let's imagine him named Elias, scribbled in his journal by candlelight. The ground quakes as if the earth itself rebels. Outside, the horizon is alive with torches. How can our king remain so serene? Does he not hear the drums of doom? On the Mongol side, discipline reigned supreme. Hulagu oversaw the operations from a hilltop vantage, his commanders executing orders with precision. Keep the lines tight. He barked to a captain. No breaches until the walls give. We take the city whole, then we cleanse it. As the defenses cracked, emissaries from the city rode out under white flags, begging terms. But surrender wasn't a reprieve, it was an invitation inside. When the Mongol forces breached the gates and streamed into the Ashford residence, they moved not as pillagers but as inspectors on a grim audit. The royal kin were herded apart from the staff, maids, cooks, and guards questioned briefly before being dismissed or detained. Ledgers were pulled from shelves, names jotted down in meticulous script who was wed to whom, which children belonged to which branch, alliances noted with sharp quills. King Reginald was whisked away to a secluded wing at once, his protests falling on deaf ears. "What is this outrage?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the gilded ceilings as rough hands bound him.
"I am the guardian of faith! Release me!"
A Mongol officer, impassive, merely replied, "Your faith ends today. Arkan decrees it." This juncture is crucial because from here, every step was premeditated, drawn from a playbook honed in prior conquests. The Mongols held a deep-seated belief that shedding the blood of exalted leaders might invoke celestial wrath. So they crafted workarounds, methods that preserved the taboo while delivering finality. King Reginald wasn't dragged to a public square for a showy end. No crowds jeered, no axes gleamed under the sun. Instead, in a dim chamber deep within the palace, attendants rolled him into heavy rugs, thick woolen layers piled on, binding him like a cocoon until he could scarcely breathe, let alone move. Then the horses were led in, their hooves clattering on the stone floor. Riders mounted and urged them forward at a measured pace, back and forth, the immense pressure grinding down. Bones snapped under the weight, vital insides gave way in agony. The king perished without a single regal drop staining the soil. The old superstition was honored, but the symbolism screamed louder. No divine hand stayed the course, no title shielded him, no heritage endured. This wasn't kindness, it was a profound negation of all he stood for. Imagine the terror in those final moments, the muffled thuds growing nearer, the air thick and suffocating, regrets flooding his mind. Had he misread the signs? Trusted too much in ethereal protections over earthly preparations? His end sent ripples through the household, a chilling prelude to what followed. With the king gone, the focus shifted to his offspring. They weren't battle-tested commanders or schemers, they were simply the next in line, and that made them lethal in the eyes of the victors. Historical whispers vary. Some say they were slain on the spot, blades flashing in the torchlight. Others hint at a short holding period, perhaps in damp cells where they pondered their fate. But the result never wavers. No Ashford prince drew breath by day's end. To spare even a child was to plant the seed of revival, a potential rallying point for dissidents. This was doctrine, not spite. Consider a poignant scene amid the chaos. The eldest son, perhaps a young man in his 20s named Jonathan, cornered in the palace gardens. Mongol guards encircled him as he pleaded, "I am no threat! I've studied scrolls, not swords. Let me live in obscurity." The lead soldier, unmoved, shook his head. "Your blood is the threat. It carries the crown." A swift motion and it was over. Such moments, multiplied across the family, underscored the Mongols' unyielding logic. The women of the Ashford court faced fates as varied as they were heartbreaking, yet none escaped the shattering of their existence. Those directly linked to the throne, queens, consorts tied to inheritance, often met quick ends, deemed too risky to leave alive. Others were rounded up like chattel, marched to Mongol camps, and doled out to officers or confederates as rewards. In their worldview, these ladies weren't blameless bystanders, they were vessels of validity. A union could legitimize a claim, a child could reignite a fallen house. So the invaders made certain no pure Ashford strain persisted. The once proud household splintered, some absorbed into foreign clans, others lost to the winds of captivity. Envision one such woman, the king's sister, Eleanor, a graceful figure known for her poetry and wisdom. As soldiers burst into her quarters, she stood tall, clutching a locket with family portraits. "Take my jewels, my lands, but spare my daughters," she implored. The commander eyed her coldly. "Your line dies with the king. You will serve our people now." Dragged away, her cries echoed through the corridors, a lament for a world crumbling. These personal tragedies wove into the larger tapestry of eradication, ensuring the Ashford name faded into oblivion, with no exiles to plot from shadows. With the core family dismantled, the Mongols turned their gaze to the city at large. What ensued wasn't mindless rampage. It was orchestrated ruin. Great halls of learning went up in flames, their priceless volumes fueling bonfires that lit the night sky. Thinkers and teachers were hunted in the streets, their knowledge silenced forever. Healing centers, once buzzing with physicians tending the sick, were toppled, their remedies scattered to the dust. Waterways were sabotaged, vital channels clogged or burst, flooding fields and starving the land. Eyewitnesses later recounted the Tigris flowing dark as night from dissolved inks and crimson from spilled lives. The intent went beyond fear. It was to forge permanence in destruction. Baghdad wasn't supposed to rise anew. Its spirit was to be broken irreparably. To grasp the depth, recall similar Mongol campaigns elsewhere. In the conquest of the Jin dynasty in northern China, after toppling the emperor, they didn't stop at the palace. Irrigation systems were wrecked, ensuring famine gripped the survivors. Libraries in Kaifeng were razed, erasing centuries of philosophy. Or in Persia, where the assassins' fortresses were not just captured but demolished stone by stone, their lore buried under rubble. Baghdad's treatment followed suit, but amplified because of its symbolic heart. The Mongols targeted not just bodies but the very idea of continuity. The invaders didn't assault Baghdad out of disdain for its beliefs. They struck because it embodied unbroken tradition. By erasing the Ashford clan, they severed the unifying force of a vast spiritual realm. Never again would a sovereign like Reginald hold sway from there. No single unchallenged hub, no cohesive command. The faith endured, splintering into pockets, power drifting to places like Cairo, eventually Istanbul. But Baghdad's preeminence was lost for good. The Mongols didn't merely slay individuals, they redirected destiny's flow. Often, Baghdad's downfall is painted as predestined, a clash of fading glory against rising tide. But it stemmed from overconfidence, poor judgments, and betting on icons over action. The Mongols weren't unbeatable, but they mastered the art of dismantling structures. If you'd been in that opulent residence in 1258, amid treasures, intellect, and custom, would you have deemed it invincible? Or glimpsed what the Mongols did, that when emblems lose their might, lineages turn fragile? Let me paint a broader picture to flesh this out. Before the Mongols ever set eyes on Baghdad, their empire had ballooned from humble origins. Genghis Khan, that unifier of tribes, had forged a machine of conquest through sheer will and innovation. Born in the harsh steppes, where survival meant constant vigilance, he learned early that half measures invited betrayal. His early campaigns against rival clans taught him the value of total victory. For instance, after defeating the Tatars, he didn't just scatter them, he integrated the useful and eliminated the leader's kin, preventing vendettas. This philosophy scaled up as his hordes swept across continents. By the time Hulagu inherited the Western Front, this approach was ingrained. En route to Baghdad, his army had already applied it to lesser targets. Take the siege of Alamut, the assassin stronghold. Those elusive warriors, masters of intrigue, were rooted out methodically. Their Grand Master was captured, his family lines traced and severed. Dialogues from that time, pieced from fragments, reveal Hulagu's mindset. These shadows think poison and daggers make them eternal, but we bring the light of finality. His men echoed the sentiment, turning fortresses into ruins. As Hulagu's forces neared Baghdad, scouts brought tales of the city's splendor. One writer reported to the Khan, "Under a starry sky, my lord, their palace gleams like a jewel, libraries stacked to the heavens, but their soldiers look wary, their walls crumbling." Hulagu smiled thinly. "Good. Splendor without strength is a hollow shell. We'll crack it open. Inside Baghdad, as tensions mounted, daily life teetered between normalcy and dread. In the bustling souks, traders haggled over spices and silks, but conversations hushed when Mongol rumors surfaced. A merchant named Tobias confided to his wife over dinner, "The king sends letters, but I fear words won't stop arrows. Should we flee?" She shook her head, eyes fearful. "Where to? This is our home, blessed by ages." Such vignettes multiplied, humanizing the buildup. When the siege locked in, the city transformed. From the ramparts, defenders watched the Mongol sea encircle them. Catapults launched flaming projectiles, setting districts ablaze. One night, a fire raged through a warehouse district, and volunteers formed bucket chains, their faces soot-streaked. "Hold the line," shouted a captain. But morale frayed as supplies dwindled. Reginald, from his tower, observed the inferno, murmuring prayers. "The divine will prevail," he told his remaining sons. But doubt crept in, unspoken. Day by day, the pressure mounted. On the 5th day, a section of wall collapsed, and Mongol riders probed the gap, only to be repelled by desperate archers. Hulagu, frustrated but patient, adjusted tactics, flooded their flanks, starved them out if needed. By the 10th day, hunger gnawed at the populace. Stories emerged of families sharing meager rations. Children crying in the night. Surrender came not with fanfare but exhaustion. Emissaries met Hulagu at his tent, knees trembling. "We yield the city," one said. Hulagu's response was curt, "Then open the gates. Our terms are absolute." As troops poured in, the systematic work began. Post-conquest, the impact rippled outward. In distant courts like those in Damascus, rulers quaked. One sultan, hearing of Reginald's fate, convened his council. "If Baghdad falls so utterly, what of us? We must ally or perish." This fragmentation sowed seeds for new powers, but the old unity vanished. Reflecting on it now, it's emotional, the hubris of believing in untouchability, the cold efficiency of erasure. Modern parallels abound. Think of regimes toppled not just by force, but by dismantling their icons, like the fall of statues in revolutions. It reminds us that power isn't just held, it's protected fiercely. Share your thoughts below. Would you have trusted in tradition or armed for the fight? Like, share, and subscribe for more dives into history's depths.